Help support the show by going to the Amazon.com search bar on the FBIA podcast webpage when doing your online shopping. From movies to groceries, Amazon has everything. Go to the website and use our show's search box to help send 10% of your purchase to the show. The search box will take you right back to the Amazon webpage. No extra cost to you, just support for the show. Again, that's FBIApodcast.com and look for the search box just under our logo.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Keil. I'm Ron.
I am Kyle, and today we are joined by Edward Valentine, editor-in-chief of BigBlueView.com, which is the Giants team page and blog on the SB Nation website. And Ed is here to talk Giants with us today. Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now, Ed, let's talk about you for a minute. How long have you been a fan of the team?
Oh, I've been following the Giants ever since I was a little kid, but been running Big Blue View since 2007.
Wow, that is a while. That you must have been one of the very first people in the SB Nation model, because most people I see 2008. So you had to get right in on the ground floor then, didn't you?
Yes. Actually, I think you're right there. I was pretty lucky because I came across SB Nation, when they were still in their infancy and still building their NFL network. So they didn't have a Giants website, and I had done a little bit of Giants writing, and fortunately it worked out for me, and I'm still here.
That's definitely excellent. Now, you said you were already doing some writing even before doing SB Nation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And really, what I'm interested in especially is, what was the transition for you from just casual fan to like a professional who's writing about the team?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm a journalist by trade. I spent about 20 years in the newspaper business, variety of newspapers. I was sports editor at a couple of small daily newspapers. And then I think it was in the late 90s, I left newspapers, did a few stops as a technical writer for some software companies here and there. And when blogging sort of started to become a thing, I dabbled in it a little bit, did some of my own writing, and actually just more or less to keep my hand in the in the sports writing end of things. That sort of led me to SB Nation, which was sort of a hobby for a while. And as the site grew, the time that it took grew, and now it's become a full-time venture for me.
So essentially, you were a pro even before you were a pro. That's kind of how I'm hearing it.
Which is interesting. It's a different dynamic to do what I do now, because your training as a journalist is to more or less keep yourself out of what you're doing. And to do what I do now, it's much more opinion, and you have to put yourself into the stories a lot of times, because you're giving your opinion, you're discussing with people, you're taking a side much more often than you would have in the traditional pre-internet newspaper days.
How hard was the transition from doing a newspaper type job, and then kind of, I mean, you said you kind of fully have transitioned into the more online and blogging and stuff like that?
It was not easy for me to do that, because you have to break that always, straight down the middle sort of writing where you're really not interjecting your opinion, because part of what we have to do on the internet, you have to create discussion. And to create discussion, a lot of times you can't just put the facts out there. To create discussion, you have to kind of know what your audience wants, and you also sometimes have to take a side, at least enough of a side so that people will argue with you. Just create that sort of back and forth, which helps, sites like mine grow, because sites like mine don't grow without community members, to come in and discuss things and keep the conversation going, because they become communities. They're more than just places where people go for information. They become communities of generally like-minded people who are there, simply because of their passion for, in my case, the Giants, and, around the SB Nation network, all of the professional teams.
That's definitely true. I know on the Colts SB Nation page that I go to, being a Colts fan, I'm at the point where I'm not satisfied just reading the articles. I want to go down and look at the comments, and certain people, you can even say, I know which way this guy's going to lean. I know which way that guy's going to lean. And you're going to get some interesting perspective just on the comments. And that definitely is made a little easier when the author is going to take a positive or negative stand on the issue.
Right. And you can tell, you can tell which side, people get dug in their opinions, and they'll make the same point over and over and over. But as long as, the way that we treat it at Big Blue View is, as long as people are willing and able to realize that everyone is entitled to an opinion, and to respect the fact that other people are going to disagree with you if you put your opinion out there, then everything's good.
I think my biggest issue when it came to opinion pieces and dealing with, the blog stuff, and what we've encountered more now that we've started this show, was people that tend to not come to the table with an effective argument, but more people that just want to attack you as the person making the comment, not the actual content of the comment.
Right, and that's the kind of thing that we've always tried to discourage at Big Blue View. I mean, there are places on the internet for that. Our website, we hope, is not one of those. Our website is a place where we hope that people will actually have a discussion and try to respect each other. So, that's the tone that we've always tried to set. The other interesting thing about my background as far as covering the Giants is that over the years now, I think I've been doing this, I think it's 8 years now, it's gotten to the point where, first the Giants would allow me to go to training camp, and then they would allow me to go to a preseason game. And last year, for the first time, they credentialed me, for the full season. And part of that, I think, comes not only from the fact that we've built a nice website, but part of that comes, I think, is helped by my journalism background, by the fact that I have been around circumstances like that before. And it doesn't, some people get sort of awestruck by it, and they're not quite sure how to handle it, because these professional teams, they do, if they let you around them, they do judge how you behave and how you handle it.
Well, speaking of awestruck, I can tell for Ron and I were like, wait a minute, this guy's like total professional. We could probably pick your brain on being a professional media member and sports personality for forever, because our intros never take this long, but we're like, oh my gosh, perspective, my emotions, and we're just so we're too deep into that. I'm going to force you to shift gears. I don't want to be rude. I could easily listen to you talk for a long time about this because I'm interested, but I figure we all want to talk a little bit about football.
Yeah, that's enough about me. So let's talk about the Giants.
There you go. All right. Now, I think it's fair to say it has been a rough couple of seasons for the Giants. But if you look back on last year, pick it apart, dice it out, give us anything, if you can find it, that you saw as a success. And I think we both have an idea, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, if you're going to go to the big success story of the year, it has to be Odell Beckham Jr. No big surprise there. I don't think anybody saw coming what Beckham was able to do in 12 games without an off-season program, without a training camp, without any preseason games, without any practice, basically in the first 4 weeks of the season, to do what he did purely on natural athletic ability alone was just incredible. And, that's the thing that everyone around the Giants sort of hangs their hat on, is that they have a superstar offensive player, to build around going forward.
Superstar might even be putting it lightly. I love watching him play. Everybody loves watching him play. It's not just the technical ability. It's that the sort of thing where we might be looking at a wizard, but he's using his powers for good. He's amazing to watch. And definitely,
I was going to say he also plays with an energy, with an electricity.
Absolutely.
That's fun to watch.
And that's kind of leading into where I was going with. Now, it almost seemed as though in the first few games, there was maybe not that level of intensity for the team. They didn't have that drive or maybe the confidence that they were going to be competitive and win as they should. And once Odell Beckham started showing up and being like ridiculous, amazing, just fantastic wideout, the defense even seemed more confident, and Eli definitely seemed more confident. And all of a sudden you've got this crazy energy. And I mean, even you could hear it in the crowd noise. Would you agree that just that one player is giving the whole team that emotional boost they need?
Oh, I think there's no doubt about that Beckham lifted the energy and lifted the attitude of the entire organization. I think it's one of the reasons why the Giants feel good heading into 2015. That they can have a better year than what they've had the last couple of years, just because they feel better about their draft class. They just feel like they have some things to build on, and Beckham, of course, is the biggest one of those.
He definitely was. I mean, fans and non-fans of the Giants alike were very excited. And let's already, I mean, normally I want to keep all the next year sort of stuff towards the end of the interview, but let's just do a little hypothetical with Odell Beckham and Victor Cruz on the field together and healthy. I mean, that's got to be a nightmare for a lot of other teams. That is a dangerous combination. I mean, how successful can this be in your mind?
Well, I think that's what everyone is looking forward to finding out. I think that, if you go back to a couple of years ago, when the Giants had Victor Cruz at his best and Hakeem Nicks at his best, their offense, their passing attack, the last time they had that was 2011 when they won the Super Bowl. And they're hoping, to see something like that again. If Cruz can come back healthy, can come back 100% and be at least close to the player that he used to be. Because, the fact of the matter is, as great as an individual player like Beckham can be, if you give these defensive coordinators a whole off season to figure out ways to defend guys, they can do it. I mean, they may not be able to stop a guy totally, but they can certainly find ways to limit the amount of time that the Giants can get the ball in Odell Beckham's hands.
Definitely true, but I mean, I don't want to fixate too much on him, but it's almost kind of hard not to, because he was so explosive. He was fun. It was fun to watch. Shifting gears just slightly. Now, Tom Coughlin, he's been with this team for a very long time, had a lot of success, and has been, he's kind of a staple there now. We're all very much aware that he is kind of on the hot seat going into the season, maybe a little bit last season. And I know with our podcast, Ron and I were saying for a while, like, well, this towards the beginning of the year, like, this isn't looking good. He's going to be gone. And a lot of retaining or leaving a coach is fan perspective. And I think having the emotional upswing towards the end of the year definitely helped Coughlin out. But as you said, you've got the community. You see the fan reaction. You've got your own professional opinion. I mean, looking forward at Tom Coughlin, what is his future with this team and this next year? I mean, is it right to keep him, or, I mean, where is this going?
Well, I think where it's going is the fact that the Giants have had 2 straight losing seasons. They haven't made the playoffs in 3 years now. And I think where this is going is that if they have another losing season, regardless of whether you can say, well, the players continue to play hard for Coughlin, we continue to love the man, we love what he represents, we love his character. I think that where this is going is that another season like the last two is going to force the Giants to go in another direction. They clearly don't want to. They clearly don't really want to force Coughlin to leave a job that he wants to keep. But they know that this can't continue. So I think very clearly everybody understands that another 6-10, 7-9 season just is not going to get it done.
On top of that, Tom Coughlin, he's not exactly a spring chicken anymore. He's up there. He's still getting it done, but
right.
How long is he going to want to continue putting in the ridiculous amount of work a head coach has to put in this, this day and age of the NFL?
If you ask Coughlin that question, he would tell you that he would very happily accept another 10 or 12 year extension.
I'm guessing the fans would not be certain about that.
No, and he would tell you that with a straight face, because that's the answer that he gave during his end of season press conference. He would very happily accept the 10 or 12 year extension, but he says, I don't think John Mara is going to talk to me about that. So he'll coach. I think the serious answer that he always gives is as long as he feels healthy, as long as his family is healthy, as long as he still feels like he has the energy to do that. But in order for him to get that opportunity, at some point you have to win games. I mean, 2 Super Bowls and everything that Coughlin has done, at some point the end comes for everybody in terms of, their careers. It came for Tom Landry. It comes for everybody. And, it came for Don Shula. So you have to win, and if they're not going to win, they'll go in another direction.
Definitely a logical perspective at this point. There's quite a bit of shakeup in the division anyway. Obviously, Chip Kelly's there, and he's bringing a weird whatever it is he's doing. The Cowboys they did what they did. So it's definitely some shakeup going on right now. Is there sort of an apprehension as to when you've got a head coach for so long in one spot, the change is often jarring? Is that having any factor in your mind as to the team keeping him around?
Well, I think that the Giants historically are conservative. They don't like to make changes unless they have to make changes. I think that they still believe that Tom Coughlin can win, but as we've seen the last couple of years, it hasn't gone well. And at some point, he's going to have to prove that he can still get it done. Because at some point it's not going to be enough to say, well, the players still like him, the players still play hard, he still controls the team. At some point you have to put W's on the board, and that's where it is for the Giants right now. This is a huge season, coming up for the organization in terms of what the future is going to hold.
Definitely is. Obviously a lot to look forward to in terms of, like you said, not just this next year, but the 5 years after are going to be so dependent on the head coach and the coordinators and the players. Let's talk about a couple of the players really quick. First off, gotta love the quarterback position. Eli Manning, I'm interested in his future because he is a good quarterback. I think so. I don't really think that's up for debate, but how much longer does he have? I don't see his talent level being such that he can hang around when he's in his very late 30s like his brother, because, Eli Manning at 70% is not the same thing as Peyton Manning at 70%. But he's still got gas in the tank. Now, can he carry this team to another Super Bowl or even a deep playoff run? Or are we at that point where it's in everybody's head to start looking for the next franchise quarterback?
Well, I think the window is still open, but I also think you're right. The window with Eli Manning is not going to last until he's 39 or 40. The window is really, 2-3 3, maybe 4 years. So we'll have to see. I mean, what's very interesting is that as of right now, Manning is heading into the last year of his contract. So it will be interesting to see if the Giants go ahead this offseason and give him a contract extension, which I think most people expect that they will. But you could also understand if they don't, simply because, as we've talked about, you have a situation where Tom Coughlin could be out the door if 2015 doesn't go well, in which case do you want to hand a brand new coach? Do you want to hand him a 35-year-old quarterback, who in that scenario hasn't won in 4 years? So it's an interesting situation for the Giants. I think Manning's going to get an extension, but we'll have to wait and see.
I'm with you. I think he'll get some form of extension, but I'm guessing at this point he is not going to be pulling in a big money extension. It's going to be respectable.
Right. He's not going to get Aaron Rodgers kind of money, nor does he deserve that kind of money at this point. But I can see the Giants giving him an extension that, for a couple of years and settling that whole question of, who's going to be our quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years. But I think you're also right. At some point, maybe not this year in the draft, but at some point in the not too distant future, the Giants do have to seriously begin looking at, who's going to be our quarterback of the future, because it's not going to be Eli for all that much longer.
That's a pretty universal thought. Now let's talk about Jason Pierre-Paul and his franchise tag. That's slightly surprising to me. He didn't seem to have, in my opinion, he did not seem to have a big time season last year, and he looked like he took a step back. So now, is that a product of what was happening around him or something else? Is the tag the right move? I could definitely see the tag being a positive in the same way that you'd see a coach like Bill Belichick franchise tag a player who he wasn't sure if he wanted to give a big time extension to due to age, maybe slight drop in production. And that often worked out well for, the crazy man in the hoodie. Is that what we're looking at with this franchise tag? Tell me your thoughts on that, please.
I think we are looking at something like that. I think the franchise tag for Jason Pierre-Paul is definitely the right move for the Giants. And the reason why I think that is because if you look at Pierre-Paul, he did have 12 and a half sacks, most of which came toward the end of the season when he played really well in the last half dozen games or so. But if you look at him, the Giants have no one else who can do what he can do along the defensive line when he's healthy, when he's playing well. They have no one who can get after the quarterback the way that he's capable of. They have no one that can play the run the way that he does. If they're going to be successful, in 2015, he's a guy that they have to have, and he's a guy who has to play well for them. The flip side of that is Pierre-Paul had a great 2011, had a pretty decent 2014, and had 2 pretty crummy years in between, during which time he also had back surgery. So you're not quite sure exactly what you have. So you really don't want to give him a long-term big money deal if you don't have to at this point.
And I am uncertain because you're going to have to excuse me on this one, but for the past few days, I've been in tiny little Dutch Harbor, Alaska, which has less than no cell service or internet or anything. So I wasn't able to get the details, but could you give me an idea? Do you think he's going to be willing to play pretty, happily with this franchise tag, or is he going to be one of the holdouts? Again, this is something that could have been rectified, and I just was not in a position to know about it.
Right. No, I think that it's a legitimate question. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a no-show for things like OTAs and voluntary workouts and the quote-unquote mandatory mini camp and all that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he doesn't surface until training camp, because by the letter of the law, he doesn't have to. So it seems to be that's what happened with Victor Cruz when the Giants, when the Giants were negotiating with Cruz a couple of years back. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Pierre-Paul doesn't show up until training camp. But really, who's gonna laugh at or who's gonna turn down a $14 million check for a year? So he'll show up, he'll play, and I think he'll play hard, provided that he's healthy, and try to get that long-term deal done, going forward, whether it's with the Giants or whether it's with somebody else.
Now, speaking of free agency, we're right on the cusp of that. I'm excited. I'm willing to bet you're pretty excited. The way we're looking at it, the Giants have right around $13 million in cap space. So going forward, do you see any massive targets that need to be either re-signed or signed from elsewhere in free agency? I mean, what is there a strategy at this time that you can think of?
Well, my guess, and the Giants, are pretty close to the vest on stuff like this, but my guess is, if you think back to last offseason, they went a little bit nuts. They signed, I don't know, something like 20 or 22 players in free agency and wound up having like 14, free agent players actually make the roster, something like that, which is way, way, way above and beyond what they usually do. I wouldn't expect that again this year, especially when you're talking about having $13 million in cap space. There's so many teams that have more money than that. I think you're probably more likely to see the Giants do what they have traditionally done, which is try to sign some low-cost veteran players, guys to fill a few holes, maybe bolster their defense some. The only real quote-unquote big name that they might chase is Devin McCourty from the New England Patriots.
Oh, everybody's going to be chasing that guy. There is no way that he's not going to get paid.
Oh, he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid big. But I mean, what the Giants would hope, I think, is, he's a local kid. He's a New York kid. He went to Rutgers. I would think that the Giants might hope that coming home has some appeal for him.
Now, your running back position tends to be a very strenuous and injury-prone spot, at least over the last couple of years. And we saw, the Andre Brown thing, and then we saw David Wilson, basically have to retire because of his injuries. And there seems to be, ever since Brandon Jacobs left and Ahmad Bradshaw kind of walked out the door, what is their plans there? I mean, could we see a team in the same division as the Cowboys go after DeMarco Murray? I mean, is that something that you think the Giants would do?
I don't think they would go after Murray. I think that if they spend big anywhere, I think it'll be on the defensive side of the ball. That said, I could see a veteran signing. I could see a guy like Shane Vereen or someone like that to be a pass catcher, third down type back. But I can't see them spending big on a guy like Murray. I think that with the limited resources they have, I think they have other places where they need to spend it. I think they're hoping that Andre Williams will become their primary back.
Maybe Roy Halou or something like that.
Yeah, somebody like that to be a pass catcher, be a third down back, to be a guy that that can help them in the passing game a little bit, because that's something they just don't have.
Definitely, as you said, with $13 million, you're not going to make a big splash in free agency. You can definitely get some signings, but more than likely it's, as you said, veterans to help fill out the roster, depth guys. You're not going to get anybody that people are going to go, how did you do that? Of course, stranger things have happened. We all remember that the Saints had next to no cap space and were able to get Jarius Byrd. Now, it might not have ended well for them, and their cap is definitely a nightmare going forward. We can all laugh about that,
right.
But
right.
I know I laugh about that, but it's going to be something where it's not going to be dynamic.
That's what I think. I mean, what people don't understand, like when you restructure contracts or when you sign these guys and you backload these contracts to where all the money's on the far end of the deal, a couple years down the road is you're sort of just kicking the can down the road and kicking the problem down the road, and eventually you pay for it one way or another.
And we did just talk to some Bears reporters earlier, and one of them gave me that news tidbit of if Jay Cutler is still on roster at the end of this week, he will have his salary essentially guaranteed for the 2016 season. So yeah, definitely contract negotiation is a massive thing, and definitely a crazy new aspect of it's not enough to be a free agent. Now we've got to front load the contracts or lower contracts, but they're all guaranteed. I like the Giants, what they're probably going to do is let's just get some guys, fill out the roster, and go into the draft and getting your blue chip players there. Now, overall, I'd say the Giants have a more complete team than most in that there are at least no glaring deficiencies like some teams. As a Colts fan, I don't care that team got to the AFC Championship. There are massive holes all over the place there. There's only a few things the Giants really need to tighten up. So how do you see the draft progressing for them? Obviously, you have your guy that you want them to take, but what do you think, given the team's history, is the choice that they're going to take? And tell us a little about who you would like to see being picked up.
Well, again, it's a little bit difficult because we don't know what's going to happen in free agency.
Right.
I think that everybody, my quote unquote, my guy right now is still Brandon Scherf, the offensive lineman from Iowa. I think that, my philosophy always is that, you have all these great weapons like Odell Beckham, and you have a good quarterback like Eli, but the good quarterback can't get the ball to the superstar wide receiver if he's laying flat on his back. So you have to have offensive linemen. You have to have guys in the trenches on defense to get after the other team's quarterback and stop the run. And I would like to see the Giants spend their resources fixing those two areas at this point. So my guy, at least heading into free agency, before we see if maybe the Giants are able to sign, a starting caliber offensive lineman, which they do need, and my guy is still Brandon Scherf.
He is definitely viewed as a pretty safe pick on the offensive line. Now, there is some talk he might not be a great fit at left tackle. You might have to move him to guard. He might be a right tackle. Mm-hmm. But pretty much everybody is sold on him being a success if utilized correctly.
All of that said, if I can interject one other thing, all of that
of
said,
course.
I would be stunned to see Jerry Reese actually draft Brandon Scherf at number 9, mostly because Jerry Reese loves his playmakers. He loves his defensive ends. He loves his cornerbacks. He loves his wide receivers. And at number 9 in the draft, I think the first time Reese has ever had a chance to pick in the top 10 of the draft, I would be stunned if there's a real playmaker sitting there, one of the top defensive ends, or maybe somebody like Amari Cooper, the wide receiver from Alabama. I would be stunned to see Reese pass up on one of those guys, just because I know how much he loves playmakers.
And you're saying that even with with the knowledge, knowing that Eli's getting older and that protection's going to become a bigger part of it, you still think that he will circumvent the offensive line for the Flash? I
think that would be his preference, which I think is why they're going to try to sign an offensive lineman in free agency. But I think that Reese has over the years shown a preference for playmakers, for running backs, for wide receivers, for pass rushers, over guys that are interior kinds of players. So that's just what I think he's done in the past. And if he follows what he's done in the past, then and that's the blueprint.
Definitely a logical way to think. I mean, like you said, he hasn't picked in the top 10 before, so that could always be a cause for shaking up the established pattern. Now, have you seen anything in the comment section on your webpage, on your website, Is there somebody that the fans really seem to be pulling for, or is it just kind of a best player available at a position of need mentality?
Well, I think everybody has a favorite player. There's obviously a section of people that are still, Brandon Scherf fans. There are a section of people that are really pulling for one of these edge rusher types like Dante Fowler or Vic Beasley. There are people that are big on Andres Pete from Stanford. So everybody has their own opinions, and I think it's kind of split. But you hear the names Scherf, you hear Andres Pete, you hear Beasley, Fowler, Bud Dupree from Kentucky. Maybe a couple of other names, maybe Danny Shelton from Washington, the big defensive tackle.
There's got to be at least one guy on there pulling for something totally out of left field. One guy on there commenting for Mariota or something, maybe just to be a troll. There's got to be at least one guy.
Oh, sure. There's got to be. And I've seen the we should trade up. We should trade all the way up to get Marcus Mariota comment. I've seen that. And then of course you see the, let's trade down out of number 9 and and see how many draft picks the Eagles will give us, So
I think that would be a little more feasible.
Yeah, it's not a horrible idea.
Well, but playing him twice a year, of course, at the same time, you give Chip Kelly his quarterback. If that doesn't work out, then Chip Kelly doesn't work out.
Exactly.
Now, Chip Kelly is definitely a threat. The Cowboys' offensive line is very dynamic. The Redskins, So what is it going to take? Yeah. We all know, I as a Colts fan, I find that Robert Griffin thing hilarious right now. But what is it going to take for this team to make the playoffs and get back to that level of competitiveness that made them Super Bowl champions? I mean, what is going to be needed for that? And if not this year, I mean, how long is this going to take?
Well, I think that what the Giants would hope for in 2015 is I think that they would be happy to, and obviously they're going to say to you, we want to win a Super Bowl. I think they would be thrilled to make the playoffs because they haven't done it in a while. And that would actually take a lot of pressure off with the whole Tom Coughlin situation, with the Eli situation. It would enable them, not to have to make a decision on Coughlin, so that, as I said earlier, they really don't want to. It's pretty obvious that they don't want to be back into that corner where they have to, shove Coughlin out the door. I think that they're hoping, that a lot of their young players who started to show up at the end of last year, Devon Kennard being one on defense, Beckham, Weston Richburg, Andre Williams, a few of these guys. I think they're hoping that these guys continue to step up, that they can fill a couple holes. They get Victor Cruz back. They're able to win 10 games and get to the playoffs. And then I think that they would feel like they're pointed back in the right direction. So it's a critical year coming up for them. And, we'll have to see how it goes. I thought last year was a year where they could have gone either way, where they could go 6-10, or if everything had gone right, they would go 10-6, and obviously they wound up at 6-10. They hope not to repeat that again.
And lastly, kind of trying to appeal to your emotional side and kind of what you perceive as the emotional side of the fans, how much hope is there for next year?
Oh, I wouldn't even categorize it as hope. I would categorize it as desperation. I would categorize it as desperation, which is interesting because I think that, Giants fans have to realize, Giants have 4 Super Bowls. There's a lot of teams out there like one in Philly that have 0 Super Bowls.
Nice.
So we have had it better than most, even though
nice stab.
Yeah, believe me, I try to play it down the middle, but I'm not above that once in a while.
Believe me, we love it. It is beautiful.
I'm not above that once in a while. So, it's just like, if you ask me about the Cowboys, I'm like, they did fine, but Jerry will screw it up eventually.
Kyle loves to make reference to the fact that Kyle's favorite thing to say this last season actually was, just wait. It's going to come down to the last game of the season, and the Redskins are going to beat the Cowboys, and it's going to be great.
I was picking teams that had like the most minimum amount of wins to beat the Cowboys, and my logic was, well, the Cowboys really like going into week 17, needing that to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. They love having that pressure so they can screw it up last minute, and they didn't, and it made me sad. Because I'm sure it made a lot of,
They had their run now. They had their run. Jerry will screw it up again eventually, so that's all good. I mean, the flip side of that is you have to think the Giants will get it right eventually too.
So, question for you: if this team does not make the NFC Championship game next year, regardless of whether or not they make the playoffs, do you see Tom Coughlin gone and this team having to make a really major shift towards something new?
No, I don't think so. I think that if they make the playoffs, I think they'll be able to they'll be able to justify, giving Coughlin, another year, or at least giving him the decision of saying, do you want to go out now, or do you want to stay for another year? I don't see a major change coming unless they miss the playoffs again. If they do miss the playoffs again, if they have another sub-500 season, then I think they're staring at a situation where they probably can't justify keeping Coughlin and basically maintaining the status quo. I think they're in a situation where they're simply forced to try something different.
So let me give you a hypothetical situation here. The season comes and goes next year, and the Giants, they go 8-8, and now the ownership, general manager, everybody's sitting there and they're going, what are we going to do to make this team playoff contender next year? And we don't think that Tom Coughlin's the way to go. So they say, okay, we're going to let go of Tom Coughlin.
Right.
Do you think it would be a situation where if Eli Manning has a decent year, they could trade him out, grab some draft picks, try and go after a quarterback in next year's draft, and pretty much it would be a complete dismantling, but you would have to be as excited for a young QB to come in with Victor Cruz and Larry Donnell and Odell Beckham Jr., and you have a whole bunch of draft picks as well if you're able to trade Eli Manning for, let's say, a first and a second, or a few, 3 or 4 draft picks. I mean, is that something that, as a fan yourself and from what you've perceived from other people, that would be something they would be okay with? I'm a Bears fan, and recently they just traded Brandon Marshall, and the opinion, it seems like it's a very north-south split.
I think it's plausible, and I think that doing something like that would actually excite a lot of people, because you've had Tom Coughlin and you've had Eli since 2004, and sometimes change is nice. Sometimes change simply changes the conversation. From a fan perspective, it simply changes the conversation. It changes the dynamic. It changes what you're talking about. Maybe it changes the perspective a little bit, and that can be kind of fun.
Well, there's definitely a lot to look forward to in this next year. Maybe a little apprehension, but at least my personal perspective is, if I'm a Giants fan going into this next year, I've got enough hope to keep me excited all through the off season.
Well, I certainly hope so, because it's a long off season, and I certainly do like to have traffic at Big Blue View. And if people are annoyed and people have no hope, then they're not going to come and talk at my website. So
we're going to do our best to send them your way, though. Trust us.
Oh, thank you for that.
Well, Ed, let's open the floor up to you. This is your moment. Anything you feel we didn't touch on that we should have, chance to rep yourself, rep your blog, rep anything else you do. Floor is yours.
Well, I'll mention that it's bigblueview.com, that it's at Big Blue View on Twitter. You can also catch me on my personal Twitter, which is @Valentine_Ed, and also Big Blue View on Facebook. Come on by, join the conversation, whatever your forum, whatever your platform that you prefer. We're out there, and the more the merrier, and we'd love to have you.
Absolutely fantastic. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today. We definitely appreciated having you on. It was a lot of fun for us. I hope it was fun for you as well.
It definitely was. Anytime you guys want to do it, I'm definitely up for that.
All right. Well, you promised that, so now just expect a call after draft time. you know it's coming.
All right, then.
All right. Thanks, Ed, so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Once again, everyone, Ed Valentine, editor-in-chief of Big Blue View. Go to bigblueview.com. Get your Giants information. It is pretty dang obvious at this point. Ed knows what he's talking about. I really had fun talking to him.
Yeah, it was great. I don't think we've had somebody in quite that much of a professional capacity on the show yet, and I was really surprised. I had bugged him to come on the show, and it had taken a while, and I think he's got quite a bit going on, especially considering of what he told us. You know, he's a pro. This is what he does, and so it was great to be able to just snap just a little bit of that time away from him.
And I know that through the editing process, we clean up the audio and all that, or you clean up the audio. I sit around and eat chips. But a couple of times you could hear bells ringing, and we went over this before the interview. Ed was actually, I mean, we got to give massive props to this guy for giving us the time of day. He was actually at an assisted living facility visiting his, I believe he said, father-in-law, and to be able to be there and take the time out for us, that is massive. That is just incredible kindness to us, and we definitely are very appreciative of that. That was really cool.
Yeah, top notch, real stand-up guy. I can't wait to talk to him again. That's going to be great. I can't wait to talk to him after the draft. He's one of the guys I'm really, really looking forward to. Not that I'm not anybody else, but I am really looking forward to talking to him again.
He's definitely, yeah, he is a big picture kind of guy. Definitely good analysis there, and pretty fun. Any of our guests who wants to throw in a couple of jabs at anybody, you, me, opposing teams, rivals, Roger Goodell, whatever. If you got that sense of humor, it is a great thing. So everybody, get onto your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop, your whatever. You're going to feel a lot smarter having read his opinion. And as he even said, he's going to be mostly fact, that little bit of opinion for seasoning. Oh, there you go. Delicious. Eat it up.
That's going to take us out of this one. So everybody have a good night.
Thank you for listening.